Today I'll be discussing ecology. Within ecology, today we're going to cover in this video a few topics like trophic levels, energy transfers, and as well as food chains and food webs. So very quickly to start off with, we'll start off with the very basics of ecology. The first things you learn, which are food chains. So in a food chain, so that if we start off by drawing a basic food chain, we'll start off with grass, very basic grass, which will be eaten by rabbits. So we'll draw a rabbit next. Let's draw a rabbit. Huge ears. So rabbits eat grass, and rabbits, they get eaten by foxes. So we'll just draw a fox after this. Foxes, what do foxes look like? Sort of brownish, aren't they? They're like yeah, sort of just like that. It's fox. So when you're in primary school, you often get taught that these arrows, they mean get eaten by, and in some cases, like here, they do, but that is not what they actually mean. What these arrows actually mean is energy gets transferred to. So what's happening here is that the grass is transferring its energy, well, not consciously, but the energy of the grass gets transferred to the rabbit. Okay, so the energy that's stored inside the grass gets transferred to the rabbit. To make this more simple, how does grass get its energy? Well, grass is a plant, and plants get their energy from the sun. So the sun's light hits the plant, and through a process called photosynthesis, which we'll probably go into more detail in a later video, but photosynthesis, that's how it's spelled. Photosynthesis. Through photosynthesis, the plant absorbs the sunlight and turns it into glucose. Glucose stores the energy as chemical energy, so this energy in the form of light energy gets converted into glucose. So if we write down the chemical equation for this, it will be, so we know that there's light energy, but we don't consider light energy as an ingredient. What we do consider are carbon dioxide plus water. That's turned into glucose and oxygen by the plant. Okay, so that is the formula for photosynthesis, and that's how plants turn light energy. We'll put that in brackets over here. So that light energy is absorbed and then turned into glucose. So this carbon dioxide, the formula for carbon dioxide is CO2 plus water, which is H2O. This is quite basic. Glucose, the formula for glucose is C6H12O6 plus O2. So if we balance this out, right, so 6 CO2 molecules plus 6 water molecules, they fuse together with the light energy that the plant has absorbed to form glucose, and then have a waste product of oxygen which the plant releases. And this energy, light energy, is stored inside the glucose as chemical energy. Okay, that's how it's transferred. Now this energy from the plant gets transferred to this rabbit. How? Through nutrition. So nutrition is the process where this rabbit eats the plant, and the glucose inside the plant, which is in the form of chemical which which has chemical energy inside it, gets eaten by the plant and gets absorbed by the rabbit. The rabbit here now, some of the glucose it stores in various forms. So animals do store, like plants often store their glucose rather than as sugar, but as starch instead of sugar. Plants do. Well, animals have various ways of storing glucose as well, but we don't need to go into that. What we do need to understand is that glucose can either be used or it can be stored by the rabbit. If, in the case that it's stored, this rabbit, if it gets eaten by a fox, if it gets stored, the glucose inside the rabbit that's stored as chemical energy will get transferred to the fox. And this is how these arrows work. It's the transfer of energy. But so that's how it works. But in the real world, these food chains aren't obviously as simple as grass, rabbit, fox. There's often many different variables to consider, and often many food chains are interconnected. And when we have loads of interconnected food chains, we call them a food web, because they look a bit like a web. So I said with the rabbit that this glucose can be stored or used. Now, when it's used, the most common way it is used is respiration, which is a process. And one thing that you need to know for sure is that respiration is not in any way. Respiration is not breathing. Okay, that is one thing you need to know. You can never say respiration is breathing, because it just isn't. And that's a very common misconception. And respiration just isn't breathing. That's something you need to know. Okay? I'll put 3 exclamation marks after it, just to emphasize it. It's not breathing. What respiration is the breakdown of molecules such as glucose to give energy to the organism. So here, if the rabbit wants energy, it can't produce its own energy through photosynthesis like the grass. Kind of just doesn't have that power. So what the rabbit does is it eats the grass, and the glucose which the grass has made, it breaks it down again to release that chemical energy and release it as well. It can use it as whichever energy it pleases. So aerobic respiration, if we add the word aerobic to this, all types of respiration are breathing, but aerobic respiration in particular is when you use oxygen and glucose to make energy. Alright, so we would have oxygen plus glucose goes to water and carbon dioxide. And I'm sure some of you must have noticed, but this formula here is the exact opposite of the formula I've written here above. And respiration, aerobic respiration, is just that. It's the opposite of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis uses the energy to put water and carbon dioxide together, and respiration releases the energy to break glucose apart into carbon dioxide and water, which are the waste products here. What the rabbit really wants is not the water or the carbon dioxide, but rather the energy. So that's energy being released here. Okay, it's not being taken in, it's being released. And again, it's the same formula, but just reversed. Right, so that's same formula, just reversed. Okay, so now we've covered respiration. That is only one of the few ways that the rabbit can use the energy. So, if any of you have been taught Mrs. Gren is a series of different checks that we can do to see if an organism is alive or not, if a thing is alive or not. Okay, I'll go through them right now. Mrs. Gren. And Mrs. Gren is movement, it's a bit weird writing downwards. Respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. These are some things that you can do to check if an organism is alive. Now, of these things, many of these things are what an organism, an animal, uses the chemical energy, the glucose it gets. So this is some of the main ways it uses them. We'll come back to that in a minute. Now, when we look at an ecology like this, like this, where we have many different organisms living in a similar habitat, where what we do is we often make pyramids of biomass and number, and these are two pyramids where we can have a look at how the organisms relate to each other in terms of their how big of an impact they have. Not so much an impact, but how many there are, as well as how much there are, so to say. So we have pyramids of numbers, which, for example, would go a bit like this. Say we have an ecology with oak trees, caterpillars, blue tits, and sparrowhawks, right? So we would have in this ecology, let's say we have, let's use a darker color like this color. We'll have one tree. Okay, we have one tree. Then we have way more caterpillars. Right, we have that many caterpillars. Then we have fewer blue tits, because we don't have as many blue tits as caterpillars. And then we have even fewer sparrowhawks, right? So we have very few sparrowhawks as well. Let's actually make that a bit bigger, because we have more than one sparrowhawk. We have quite a few sparrowhawks actually. Let's color that in. Okay. We have sparrowhawks. I can't be bothered to color those in. But we have, so let's label these, because labeling is always good. Sparrowhawk. Blue tit. Caterpillar. And oak tree. Right, we have those. This is called a pyramid of numbers. And it is a pyramid which is reasonably reliable, but as you can see, it's quite obvious that the oak tree feeding all these different organisms is quite a major part of this ecology. So this pyramid doesn't represent it very well, because it doesn't show how much of an impact this oak tree plays on the ecology and how much oak tree there is. And that's where a pyramid of biomass comes in. A pyramid of biomass measures the amount of dry mass that an organism has inside the ecology, and they are a lot more reliable than pyramids of numbers. And that is why they're often used a lot more by scientists. So a pyramid of biomass for this particular ecology would go like, let's first write the name, mid, because there's only one. But we would have, since this oak tree is really heavy and it has enough biomass to feed all these different organisms above it, because these caterpillars are feeding on this oak tree, so for the caterpillars to be fed and not die off, the oak tree has to have more stuff, more biomass for the caterpillars to eat, for them not to die out. So this shows why this is so unreliable. This oak tree will actually be a lot bigger than the caterpillars. Right? It'll be a lot heavier, and it'll have a lot more stuff in it, a lot more biomass. Then it'll be the caterpillars, like this, and then there'll be the blue tits, and then there'll be the sparrowhawks. That is how a pyramid of biomass would look, and you can see it is a very good pyramid. It's quite even, and that's how a pyramid of biomass should be, because it accurately shows the ecology and how each level goes up and up. So let's label this as well. So we have sparrowhawk, blue tit, we have caterpillar, and we have oak tree. Now, each level, as I said, as the levels go up and up, each level of this pyramid is called. It has a specific name, and these are called trophic levels. Okay, I'll write that down. Trophic levels. So these trophic levels are each level of the pyramid. So we have the first trophic level, second, etc., etc. And one question that's often been asked is, why is energy lost between the trophic levels? Right, so I'll write that question down, and that is one question we're going to be answering today. Why is energy lost between the trophic levels? And the answer to this is that energy is lost between the trophic levels because organisms use some of the energy that's been transferred to them before they're killed and eaten. So this rabbit will use up some of its energy. As I said, it can be stored or used, and it will use up some of its energy before it gets eaten by the fox. And these are used in some of these Mrs. Gren terms. So the rabbit uses some of this energy that it gets to eat grass. So it eats grass, and the energy it gets from the grass, it uses to eat more grass. Okay, so nutrition. Nutrition is one of the ones that it uses. So, I don't have many colours today with me, but I'll use light blue. Nutrition is one of the reasons that energy is lost between the trophic levels, because organisms use it to eat more food. Excretion, so urine, feces, both of these things, excretion is releasing the waste from the organism's body, and the rabbit does use some of the energy it gets from the grass to poop and pee. So excretion. Excretion is another one. Then we have movement. Yeah, a rabbit uses some of its energy to move. We've already covered that it also uses some of its energy to respire, so respiration. And it uses some of its energy to stay warm. But that does go under respiration, but we'll say warmth. Yeah? Or, homeostasis, making sure it's in a temperature and its sugar levels are stable. So that does go under respiration, but warmth. So we've covered 1, 2, 3, 4 of Mrs. Gren, yeah? So sensitivity, we can't really classify that. We can't really say it uses energy for sensitivity. That might go under respiration. But the two main ones we haven't covered are growth and reproduction. The thing is, growth and reproduction are utterly wrong answers, because energy is not lost between trophic levels because of growth and reproduction, because this fox here, if this rabbit eats more grass and gets plumper and gets bigger, the fox can still eat the rabbit, and it will still eat the meat that the rabbit grows. I keep calling it a rabbit, sorry. A rabbit. The rabbit grows. So this rabbit eats more grass, it gets bigger, the fox eats it, and it eats the extra meat that it gets. And reproduction, if this rabbit has babies, this fox can eat the babies too. That energy is not necessarily lost. And so these two are wrong answers. It's not growth and it's not reproduction. But there are more than just these reasons. The energy that goes into growth and reproduction, as I said, is not lost, but most predators will not consume the entire organism. So if this fox had tusks, which it doesn't, but if it did, this fox may not eat the tusks. And that's energy that's gone into growing those tusks, and the energy that's part of it. So in some ways, growth in some parts may actually be a reason that energy is lost, but not in all circumstances. So if the rabbit grows tusks, the fox might not eat all the tusks, and foxes sometimes don't eat all of rabbit's fur. So that's, again, energy that's lost. As well as this, there is the reason that any one species will not completely eat any other species, because the energy of the other species, if it eats, or if this fox eats the entire rabbit race in this ecology, then this fox will die. And so it's impossible for these two trophic levels to be equal, because the moment that the caterpillars eat the entire oak tree, they can't survive anymore. If we're assuming that this food chain is a food chain within itself and the caterpillars only eat the oak tree, then this caterpillar cannot eat the entire... These caterpillar colony can't eat the entire oak tree, because if it does, it ceases to exist, because it has nothing to eat. And that is another reason. And those are some of the reasons that energy is lost. I haven't written all of them down. Those are the basics of trophic levels and food chains and pyramids of numbers, biomass, etc. I hope you've learned something, and now you know about ecology.